Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tamiya's iconic ME262 A-1a with a little bit of a twist. So then, the twist for this video is in the box, and that is, it has already been started. This kit hasn't been touched now for about 20 years, so it's my task in this video to get it over the finish line. I must say, it won't be a very hard task purely because this kit has been made by someone that I know very well, and I entrust them completely to have done a superb job on all aspects of the started kit. And I'll show you a bit of the cockpit now. As you can see, the cockpit on screen now has been masterfully built. It's all out of the box with the exception of the seatbelts, and I personally don't think I could do much better myself, so we're at a great starting point already. So then, now it's time for me to start on my part of the build. What I'm first going to do is take the lovely cockpit tub and insert it underneath through the two fuselage halves. This slots and clicks into position. After that, I can take the pre-assembled wings and also slot them into position, encapsulating the wheel well and also the cockpit tub. And just like that, the 262 is already starting to take shape. Now the rear bulkhead of the cockpit can slot into position once again with perfect fitment, and then we can flip the 262 over and start to build up some of the front end. Firstly, on either side of the front nose wheel well, I can put on these two parts. They have slits in them, and I believe this is where the expended ammunition shells could come out. Turning my attention to the rear, firstly the rudder can go on and it has a lovely nice long locating tab to ensure proper fitment. Then both of the horizontal stabilizers can kind of lock together using a tooth and locking mechanism. Now moving my attention back to the front end, I can start to build up where the four cannons would go. It's good to note that Tamiya do give you the option to have all of the cannons in there and the cannon bays open, but I didn't want to affect the sleek lines of the 262. Now I can start to build up some sub-assemblies, specifically it's the engine nacelles. The main body of the engine is just in two halves which slot together. Then I can turn my attention to the intake. There is a small inaccuracy here, and that's with the inlet cone. It is offset by 90 degrees. So to sort this out, all you have to do is kind of chop off the little locating pin and twist it 90 degrees, and there you go, problem solved. A similar operation with locking pins can also happen for the exhaust end of the engines. I haven't mentioned it yet, but all parts that you can see are going to be secured on using Tamiya's extra thin cement. The engine to wing join wasn't up to my personal preference, so I used a thin sanding stick just to sort this out. Before the front glazing can be cemented onto the aircraft, there has to be some interior protective glass which has to be fitted first. I did this using some ultra glue. All the glazings were masked off using an Edward mask set, and then they could be cemented onto the model, all having very good fitment. The main canopy had two pegs cut off so that it could be secured on in the closed position. Once everything had been secured and also masked off, I could use Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 Black to prime the entire model and reveal any imperfections. They could then be sorted out, and then we had a great base to then start the painting. The previous owner of this kit also had purchased an Eagle Decals sheet. There's some superb schemes in this, but for me, White 14 stood out as being one of the most unique and interesting looking 262s, so that's the one that I'm going to be modelling today. I begin the painting process on the underside by using Mr. Colour's C117 RLM76 Light Blue. All my pressures, thinning ratios and all of that lovely technical stuff should be able to be seen in the top right hand side of your screen. However, what am I actually trying to do with the paint? So I'm trying to do a technique called black basing, but with my own little spin. What you can see me doing now is very standard. I'm taking that nice highly diluted paint and just mottling it or marbling it in the middle of all of the panels. By mottling or marbling, you create a nice bit of texture in the paint and give you subtle variation once everything has been blended in. And because I'm staying away from most of the panel lines, it creates some subtle and natural shading once everything gets blended over. This is a great technique if you've never done shading before and you want to give it a go, because if you mess up, well hey, it's not the end of the world, just paint over it. Once I had done that initial mottling stage, this is my result. Now, to put my own little twist on it, what I'm going to do is add 2 drops of white into the mix just to create a slightly lightened version of that RLM76, and then highly concentrate it around the very edges of all of the panels. What this does is create even more contrast between the sharper and darker panel lines and the inner lighter panel. In just a few moments, you'll see me start to blend all of the effects together, and that will give a very worn and tattered looking paint effect. And as this airframe was at the very end of the war, I believe that is exactly what it would have looked like. So there you go, that ties up the underside, and I was very happy with how it looked. It will hopefully be enhanced later on with some weathering. Now I can move on to doing a very similar process on the top surfaces of the 262, but this time using Mr. Colour's C112, which is RLM 82. As I said, I'm going to follow a very similar process to what I did with the underside, with a few changes which I'll get to in a moment. White 14 is quite unique in the fact that it has RLM 70 superimposed on top of it. This does cover up quite a lot of the underlying camouflage. To make sure that the RLM 70 isn't too bold and in your face and take away from the beautiful green and brown colour of the original camouflage, I made the demarcation quite low so it gave me more room on the model to work with. So this is where the painting of the underside differs a little bit to the top surfaces. On the top surfaces, what I've just done is added a few drops of Sky Type S into the RLM 82 paint. What this does is give me a slightly more saturated paint, which can then be post shaded onto all of these green areas. I'm making sure just to go around the edges of panels and not onto the actual panel lines. This is a slightly new approach for me personally, as usually I'm very much one for making lots of different tones of the colours and putting it on there. This time what I'm going to do is just use that one lightened tone and really utilise it and grain it into the paint to give more subtle and natural shading. What do you think? Let me know down below. So this was the finished result with all the shading. I know it looks very saturated and very bold right now, but as the build goes on and more layers go onto it, it will all get toned down. Now I can repeat this painting process again for the RLM81. However, I'm not going to use Mr. Color's RLM81, and in fact I'm going to use Mr. Color C131, which is a slightly more brown version of RLM81. Although it doesn't say RLM81 on the tin, I think it is a pretty good substitute. To create the slightly more saturated paint you can see me using on screen now, I added a few drops of RAF Dark Earth into the mixture, which feels quite funny as I've now used 2 RAF colours on a Luftwaffe model. Anyway, this is what the RLM 81 and 82 looked like once it was all sprayed down, and I think it looked brilliant. But what makes White 14 special is the superimposed RLM 70, which goes in blotches all over the aircraft. And to do this, I had to make sure that my airbrush was incredibly accurate and also comfortable to use. And the airbrush which I'm going to be using is the Mr. Hobby Pro Convoy 0.2mm. The Mr. Hobby Pro Convoy has been my airbrush of choice now for over a year, and for any of you who have been following the channel for a while, I think you can agree with me when I said that this brush has really helped me push my modelling skills and definitely changed my approach to painting models in a new way. I was introduced to the Pro Convoy down at Hannah's London. Hannah's is my local model shop, and it is what every modeller's dreams are made of. Models of all types from floor to ceiling, paints, weathering products, tools, airbrushes and much more. It's all there. If you are interested in buying a new airbrush or are a beginner wanting to learn more, Hannah's and myself will definitely be able to help you. The details are on screen now, so definitely come on down or contact us. Now, as you can see by these ludicrously big mottles on the wings, the Pro Convoy is very accurate and I'm very comfortable using it. In terms of my painting approach, you might notice that they have less post shading on them, and that is for me trying to indicate to the viewer of the model that these have been superimposed and are much fresher onto the aircraft. So I hope that you understand my vision behind that. So with the main painting stage all done and dusted, and I was very happy with how it came out, all I had to do to finish it off was spray a band of RLM 04 around the fuselage. I started this off by spraying down some white just to make sure it was a little bit easier to build up that lovely yellow colour. After that had dried, I got out RLM 04 from Mr. Colour, which is C113, and sprayed it on. So then, that concludes the painting for this model. I thought it was a really interesting one to watch and definitely an interesting one to paint. To seal it in, I'm going to be using GX100, and then the 20-year-old decals can be placed on. So I hope you understand why I didn't film much of that. It was quite a nail-biting experience, but they all went down all okay. They could be resealed in GX100, and then I can move on to the weathering. The first stage of weathering is just going to be a simple black panel line wash all around the aircraft. After the panel wash had been applied and also wiped off, I could start doing some more collected and congregated grime around where the ground crew and the pilots would be getting in and out of the aircraft. To do this, I'm going to be using Mr. Weathering Colours Ground Brown Wash. I initially apply the wash into all the areas where I want this build-up of grime, and then I use a variety of brushes to start to blend everything in and make it look a little bit more natural. I found myself having to repeat this process about 3 or 4 times until I was at a level where I was happy with the result. It's a good thing to note that what you can see in this clip isn't the final effect. Like I said earlier, I repeated the process 1 or 2 more times so I got an even bigger build-up of that grime, just to clear up any loose ends which you might be thinking. What I did is then repeated this exact process on the underside of the model, trying to simulate any dirt and grime from the ground being kicked up from the tyres as it's taking off. Now that the oil work was all finished, I could give the entire model a nice layer of VMS's matte varnish and utilise a new product from Ammo called the Lock and Load. Pretty much what these are just generic weathering pencils, but the graphite which they provide you is interchangeable into this main pen, and it's also very highly pigmented, so it gives a really nice stark contrast and it's very easy to get the desired effect you're looking for. As you can see on this clip here, because it's so highly pigmented, I just have to skim the pencil along the top of the surface and it gives these really authentic looking metal chips. A really interesting tool, and I can't wait to explore it further in the future. Also, these can be seen down at Hannon's, so if you are interested, take a look down there. Now that concludes the weathering. I can move my attention back onto working on some of these sub-assemblies. Here you can see on screen that I'm working on the landing gear legs. I'm going to be using some cutting edge resin wheels which were also provided in the box from 20 years ago, and I've also added some lead wire onto the landing gear legs to simulate some brake lines. The tyres in their current state looked far too pristine, and also it'd be rude not to highlight that lovely diamond thread. So I used some pigments and just dry brushed it into all the cracks, and it highlighted the brilliant detail and made them look like they've been used. I could then seal everything in using some matte varnish and then begin to put on the landing gear doors using some super glue. Now it's time to put her on her feet, so all of the landing gear legs can be cemented into position using some super glue, and once again this is Tamiya Masterclass in Engineering. Lovely big pins making sure they're secure and also helping you get the right angle. Now we're really on the home straight with this 262 now. All that has to happen is put the remaining landing gear doors on, any antennas, take off the masking tape and give it a nice dust off. And really, that concludes this build. So I'd like to say thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have, let me know down below and maybe potentially even subscribe for more content like this in the future. I've got some really cool projects lined up soon and I'm sure you don't want to miss them. But anyway, enjoy the final photos and videos, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye.
What was that? What the hell was that? It went by like we were standing still. Blue leader to group. Get off the air. Going by at 2 o'clock. What the hell is it?
It was the Messerschmitt 262, the world's first operational jet fighter.